Hey guys, it's Peter with the Garden Family. Today I'm going to tell you 4 ways that we effectively stop squash vine borers from killing our plants year after year. Come on over here, let's go look at our zucchini plants and I'll tell you all about them. All right. So the 4 different ways that we are going to combat the squash vine borer is we're going to start them under cover, we're going to grow them vertically, we're going to prune all but the newest leaves, and we are going to have to inspect our plants every day. Before we get into the details of each one of those steps, let's talk a little bit about the squash vine borer. The squash vine borer is a daytime moth. So it flies around during the day at the same time that the pollinators are flying around, and it will lay a very small sort of strawberry seed size egg on the leaves and the stems of the plant. In about a week, that egg will hatch into a small larva that will burrow into the stem of the squash plant. The squash plant stems are hollow, so it allows it to sort of hide in there, eat, get bigger, and eventually make its way down to the main stem of the plant and eat it from the inside out. And generally, you don't even know that this is happening until it's too late and your plants die. So let's talk a little bit about the first step, which is to start your plants under cover. So we actually just took it off, but we started this plant with a row cover. And the row cover covers the plant. It doesn't allow any insects to come in. And initially, when you're growing these squash plant, you're going to get little to no fruit production. You might get a male flower here and there, but generally not much fruit production. And those small stems are very susceptible to the squash vine borer. They're not very tough. The larvae can easily burrow into them. So what we do is, for the first 3 to 4 weeks of the plant's life, it's just covered with a fleece row cover. This allows the plant to get large, to get sort of to prime fruit-bearing production maturity, and keeps it fully protected from the squash vine borer during that time. So step number 2 was to grow them vertically. As you can see here, this plant looks a little different than normal, and you can see it's kind of got this long stem, and that stem is being grown up this stake that I have in the ground. What this does is it allows the leaves to be off the ground, and it allows us to more easily inspect each one of the leaves and the stems in order to see the small eggs as they're laid on the plant. Step 3 was to prune the plant regularly. So as you can see, again, we have pruned all of these bottom branches here, and that includes these, these male fruit stalks or male flower stalks. And what that does is it brings all of the leaves off the ground, and it allows us to inspect the plant much more easily. The other thing I found is it does take about a week for the eggs to hatch. These squash plants are so fast growing that these leaves, a lot of these leaves, are less than a week old. And in a mature plant, this stalk is so thick down below that the immature larvae have a hard time eating through this stalk, the main stalk. But how they get there is they attach to one of these smaller branches, go to the hollow stem, and then make their way to the base stalk. At that point, they're much bigger and they're able to get inside and cut off the vascular supply of the plant. Step number 4, as I said, is you got to inspect your plants every day. This is probably the biggest pain in the butt. again, you have about a week window to find the eggs and remove them. It definitely helps removing a lot of the extra leaves, because you can imagine if all of these leaves were on this plant, it would be very, very difficult to inspect each leaf. And I found it doesn't really inhibit, fruit production or anything like that to remove the older leaves. So I actually haven't inspected the pumpkin plant that I have over here. So let's go ahead and look over there and see what we can find, and see if any squash vine borers visited us today. So I have this volunteer pumpkin next to my compost pile, and you can see one of the things I've done with this pumpkin plant is grow it vertically, similar to the squash plant. So I have it going up this pole here, and then it's going to travel along the fencing that I have to keep my compost pile in. And this allows me to look underneath the plant, look at each leaf, and really inspect for the squash vine borer eggs. So the first thing I'm going to do here, because I haven't done it in a bit, is I'm actually going to remove a lot of these bottom leaves. I'm not too worried about removing male flowers at this point, because I don't have any female flowers open. And each time I remove one, I kind of look around. They tend to like to congregate right at the stem leaf transition, and just to kind of see, have I had any squash vine borers visit today, or did I miss any yesterday when I looked? And actually right here I can see 2 eggs, squash vine borer eggs, on this male flower. Okay, so on this male flower here, you can see these 2 tiny dots. Those are squash vine borer eggs. And when I remove this flower stalk, one of the things you notice, and we got out of focus here. There we go. Is the flower stalk itself is hollow. And that's where the squash vine borer is going to burrow in through this tender stem, and eventually they'll come into the main stalk of the plant. Once it gets there, it'll just start eating away the inside of the plant, and it'll be a goner. So in a week, this would have basically started the end of this pumpkin plant's life. Well, hopefully that gave you a good overview of the squash vine borer and our approach to getting rid of them. It definitely takes a lot of work. I'm in the garden every day looking for these, but it is manageable. It is possible to grow squash in the Midwest without losing your squash plants. One thing I should say is this butternut squash that's over my head here, while it can be attacked by squash vine borer, it is much more resistant to it. So if you're having trouble and you're having trouble growing these, there are some resistant varieties, including butternut, that you might be able to grow successfully. Happy gardening, everyone.